good evening, everyone. My name is Sydney Yeager, and I'm the Senior Public Programs Producer at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's program, Jewish Identity in American Art with Richard McBee. Here at the museum, we are dedicated to the crucial mission of educating our diverse community about Jewish life and heritage before, during, and after the Holocaust. As part of that mission, our programs illuminate the stories of survivors, broader histories of hate and anti-Semitism, stories of resistance against injustice, and more. Thank you so much for joining us today virtually. We hope that if you're able to, you will visit the museum in person to see our current and upcoming exhibitions, including Art of Freedom, the life and work of Arthur Szyk, which is opening on December 7th, 2025. We also hope that you'll join us this weekend for the 2025 New York Jewish Book Festival, which is this Sunday, November 16th. Closed captions are available on today's program, and instructions on how to turn captions on or off are posted in the chat. If you have questions for our speaker during the program, please put them in the Zoom Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the hour. So again, that's the Zoom Q&A box and not the chat. Today, we are honored to be joined again by Richard McBee. Richard studied painting at the Art Students League of New York. His subject matter has been drawn from the Bible and Jewish history since 1976. Since 2008, he has focused on the pivotal role of women in biblical narratives. He was program director of the Alliance of Figurative Artists in the 1980s, and in 1991 was one of the founding members of the American Guild of Judaic Art. In 2008, he co-founded the Jewish Art Salon to promote contemporary Jewish art through exhibitions and lectures. He reviewed the Jewish art scene from 2000 to 2014 in the Jewish press and has written for The Forward, The Jewish Week, Jewish Ideas Daily, and Mosaic magazine. He is a member of the International Association of Art Critics and the Association for Jewish Studies. Leading scholars of Jewish art, including Matthew Baigell and Ori Z. Soltes, have discussed his artwork extensively. He continues to write, exhibit, lecture, and curate exhibitions on Jewish art, and his artwork is in many private collections throughout the country. So thank you so much for joining us, and now I'm going to pass things over to Richard.
Thank you so much, Sydney. So I want to thank the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust, for hosting me. It's a pleasure. This is now the second time I have been on, and some of you who may have come to the last one, which was about 2 weeks ago, we started with the birth of Jewish art. We started with the year 81. And then moved on to, that was the Arch of Titus. And then when we moved on to De Europos around 250 of the Common Era. And then we went through a bunch of synagogue mosaics. It was all, hate to use the phrase, old stuff. Well, tonight is going to be radically different. This is all art, essentially, since the 1970s. And it's based upon a book that Matthew Baigell wrote, which is called Jewish Identity in American Art. And he published it in 2019. And it's a brilliant, brilliant survey of contemporary Jewish artists in that time, in that almost 45 to 50 year period of time. So let's see here. Okay. Aha. So Matthew Baigell is a professor emeritus in the Department of Art History at Rutgers University. He's an author, editor, and co-editor of over 20 books on American and Jewish American art. This is his thing. He is the expert, and this book really shows it. This book is he calls it a unique generation, comparing generational responses, and it holds list. He first starts out with a whole exposition on Jewish feminist art, and then he has about 11 artists that he focuses on. I'm not going to read it because we're going to go through them, pretty much every one of them in our presentation. Let's see here. Oh, yes. Well, you should understand, I'm only going to be able to show you one, maybe two works of some of these artists. It's really a travesty. These artists have worked very hard. They've worked most of their actually creative career on this Jewish content, but it's all they have time for. Matthew's book was much better. He showed anywhere between 7 to 10 artworks each for all the artists, but it's only a glimpse. But it's the best we can do, essentially, as this survey of really, again, as I said, over the last 45 to 50 years. Please understand that the vast majority of the commentary you're going to hear tonight is by Matthew Baigell. It's from his book. And I've added my own occasional comments. But really, this is mostly, as I say, his show. So The first thing I wanted to discuss was the painting on the cover. It's Girl Blessing the Torah. It's by Brian Shapiro. And according to Matthew, it captures the overall attitude of this generation of artists. The subject is both traditional and radical. It's traditional in that the way the young woman grasping the Torah, evoking its centrality to Judaism, as well as honoring the respect and love the artists hold for the Torah and for Judaism. Wait a minute. It's a young woman who holds the Torah, not a man. So in its way, this image would be unthinkable, certainly, until recent decades, and hence it sits on that border. So it both updates tradition and symbolizing actually many of the artist's desires here in our presentation to assert the contemporary relevance of ability for Judaism to change with the time. Again, a painting by Brian Shapiro called The Girl Blessing the Torah. So the struggle, a struggle for a place at the table. That's the beginning of the artist's journey. Matthew Baigell says in the beginning of the book, this is a story that needs to be told. These artists, these are the ones who are most willing to take risks with their material, the ones who have opened up new ways to think and create art with Jewish, religious, and secular content. And he says, by turning to the original sources, they have leapfrogged back over the centuries, past the experiences of their recent and more distant elders, to find an inspiration and subject matter directly in the ancient texts, as well as in their readings of current events. This is, as I might say, a new leaf. So, not surprisingly, rejection and denial of Jewish art from, of course, Jews. First, a quote from Adolf Gottlieb, one of the most famous abstract expressionists of his time. He said, "The idea of being a Jewish artist is like being a professional Jew. I think art is international and should transcend racial, ethnic, religious, and national boundaries." That was quite the credo of the abstract expressionists and actually of many Jewish artists, as in certainly the earlier part of the 20th century, the mid part of the 20th century. I might add that this attitude is still frequently held by many Jewish artists who don't do the kind of subject matter you're going to see tonight. Okay, so another comment by the great critic Hilton Kramer. He wrote in Commentary magazine, Hyman Bloom's paintings stimulate the same surprise and dismay one feels at finding gefilte fish at a fashionable cocktail party. Well, Hilton, dear Hilton. So this painting on the left is by Hyman Bloom. It's called The Synagogue. He painted it approximately 1940, but as if almost to contradict Hilton Kramer, it was acquired almost immediately by the Museum of Modern Art in 1943. This painting is really quite amazing because it shows the almost ecstatic moment of Kol Nidre on Yom Kippur. Beautiful, wonderful painting in which an artist is actually declaring himself, I'm Jewish, this is a moment that is important, and I'm going to depict it without fear. But it had to be done. So Jewish art did awaken. So the first two quotes I'm going to give, Archie Rand, he said, a culture's art is a normalizing accessory, a banner of self-recognition that allows the culture to sit at the table and ante up. Indeed. That's Archie. Archie, you'll hear about him a little bit later on in the presentation. This painting, or this group of paintings, are called the 613. They're acrylic on canvas, and in fact, that is 613 paintings that depict all of the 613 mitzvahs that are in the 5 Books of Moses. Ruth Weisberg, she says, this is her painting on the left, Ruth and Naomi. Okay, she says, I am always female, and I am always Jewish. I am nourished by the history of the Jews, the history of the world, and the unwritten history of women. So, just to give you a little context about Jewish art awakening, well, many of these people, you'll see, not all of them, but many of them tonight, you'll see actually they all created and joined something called the Jewish Art Salon. It was created actually by Yona Vera. I was one of the founding members also in 2008. It's the world's largest Jewish visual art organization. It's based in New York City. It has over 500 members and over something like 2,500 subscribers. They've had over 40 art exhibitions and events. It's a global network of contemporary artists, curators, art historians, and art writers. Jewish art is alive and well. So this is a bit of what Matthew has said in a number of places in his book about this idea of contemporary artists using Jewish subject matter. These artists use Jewish texts, the Hebrew Bible, the Talmud, Kabbalah, Midrashim, commentaries, and prayer books. Their subjects are framed by feminism, gender, spiritualism, proud identity, and a resistance to assimilation. The ancient texts inform, present attitudes in which they see reflections of modern life. They return to the traditional texts as a home. They're comfortable with them. They don't read the Bible for piety, but they create modern midrashim to make the old stories relevant, to make Judaism a living religion. And why the Bible? Because the Bible provides a vast imagination, a Jewish environment. Jewish subjects that make you feel larger than yourself, belonging and being bound to a people with a shared history. To personalize these stories and relate them to our world, to remake Jewish identity. This is important. Jews of the mid-century felt the need to be universalists, not these Jewish artists. This generation felt no need to choose one identity over another. They identify as both culturally mainstream and a proud minority. This is what Matthew Baigell has identified as the change from my generation and the previous generation of Jewish artists. You could imagine, of course, the first people that he will be talking about, Jewish tradition, a rejection of it. This is a work by Helene Ayon. She says, I still love the culture, but feel it needs a real airing out. I love the word Torah, but when I look at it, I feel betrayed. I still take the good parts, but those aren't enough. I want to be Jewish. I love being Jewish. At the same time, I can't swallow this. She says, God needs to be liberated. The divine being could not have written this misogynist text. That's what she says. So this is, by the way, a self-portrait that she did. She did quite late in her life in 2010, in which the name of God is actually projected on her forehead. She is easily one of the most confrontational and fearless feminist artists since the 1990s. She grew up Orthodox, abandoned Orthodox practice as an adult, and spent the rest of her life raising hell as a Jewish artist. This is what she did. She did something called the Liberation of God. This is from 1990 to 1996. It features the 5 books of Moses, which form the Torah, of course. In each book, Ayon, she highlighted passages on transparent parchment, overlaying the text, which offended her feminist and humanist outlook. Ayon highlighted the words that refer to vengeance and deception and cruelty and misogyny. She included in the exhibition a video of her, in fact, actually highlighting each passage by hand. The video shows only her hand, allows one to hear the marker squeaking across the page and the crinkling of the parchment as she highlights words in pink. This is protest. Another feminist protest, Kara Hamnoy. She says, although I am what one would call a severely secular Jew, I do enjoy some of the traditions and rituals. Hamoy mentioned that she is a storyteller who wants young girls to know that the women in the Bible are as tough as the men and are often able to take care of themselves by whatever means possible. Here, Hamoy's poignant artwork inscribes the mourner's Kaddish, the Aramaic, quote, mourner's prayer, on this fictional garment of mourning. The emotions of pain and reflection are literally worn to create the experience. The name of the work is called The Mourning Coat. Tradition, endless fascination, another group of artists. Mark Podwall. This is what Matthew wrote about him. He said, neither from a religious, it's what he wrote about himself. Neither from a religious family, nor observant, I nonetheless derive continued inspiration from my heritage. fascinated by Jewish history and moved by its teaching, enchanted by its legends and folklore, and delighted by Yiddish proverbs, I have attempted through my work to enliven its traditions, wisdom, and beauty, and wit in a visual way, which is exactly what he did. So, as I said before, full disclosure, he was my dermatologist. Podwell maintained a full medical practice for many years, even though as he threw himself into countless artistic projects. He was an amazing individual. In fact, on almost every visit that I made to him in his office, he would first lead me to the back room to see his latest drawings and prints. He has a very long history. He created many New York Times op-ed illustrations. He illustrated many dozens of books on Jewish history and customs and ideas. Mark collaborated with Eli Wiesel on many book projects, as well as a special illustrated Agadim. Here, in Expulsion, he encapsulates the tragic end of Jewish life in the Iberian Peninsula. As you can see, the ship sailing the sea with a Sefer Torah carried away from Spain and Portugal. Ruth Weisberg. She was an early, quote, powerful presence in California feminist art movement, alongside notable artists such as Judy Chicago and Miriam Shapiro. For her, the essential element was a personal narrative, and since the 1970s has embraced her Jewish heritage, especially historical and social justice themes. So this piece she has is called The Floating World. It zeroes in on those on shipboard who have to leave their home in order to gain safety. From Spain in 1492, from Europe in the early 1940s, and from Africa, Asia, and Latin America countries in our own time. She made this painting, mixed media paint on unstretched canvas, of obviously people in a ship sailing away, and you see the ship that they are sailing on in the background, right? Refugees going to a new land, and very likely, in her eye, in going to America. I have to say, now 22 years later, the promise of safety for the world's displaced immigrants seems tragically distant. But this was the hope then, and hopefully it will be a hope in the future. Bob Kirschbaum. I've known him for many years. His work always presents me with an intellectual challenge because it's highly intellectual, and I wouldn't even say conceptual. Of course it's conceptual, but it is conceptual in a way in that he has an idea and he's run with it, and now I had to catch up to try to really understand what he's done. So let's look at this. He's done something called the 42-letter name matrix. Good. It's a digital drawing, and so let's look at it. Kirschbaum took an abstract construct, okay, which, by the way, is this idea of a 42-letter name. By the way, that's the 42-letter name of God. He took it as a construct, and of course, that for an artist, that is the proverbial lump of clay. And he made it tangible as a three-dimensional idea, and then abstracted it, yet again, into a two-dimensional drawing. See if you can follow me. His lump of clay was a 9-square grid, which he then mentally made into a cube, defined as an axiometric projection where the parallel lines never converge. This concept related to notions of, as you could well guess, infinity and the complexity of God. The cube's lines theoretically radiating in all possible directions. So this is the kind of stuff that he does, and this is the drawing he does. He's actually done physical objects of things like this. So let me just get you up to speed. So he's a professor of fine art at Trinity College, and over his 40-year obsession, though, he's had an obsession with the Temple and the Temple Mount, as well as related Jewish abstract structures that define his conceptual artistic universe. The 42-letter name of God is a mystical code. It is a code composed of 7 sentences, Hebrew sentences, each with 5 letters, which add up to 42 letters found in the ancient Hebrew prayer, Ana B'koach, we beg you with the strength. Conceptual, yes. Abstract, yes. But firmly rooted in Jewish spirituality, and effectively in Kabbalah and mysticism, and now, with this drawing and many of the objects that he has made, actually concrete objects. Bob Kirschbaum. Siona Benjamin. So a little background about Siona. Siona was born and raised in the Jewish community in Mumbai, India, and came to the United States as a college student and grew, in fact, as a self-identified woman of color Jewish artist. That's how she identifies herself. For over 30 years, Benjamin has pictorially fused her Indian and American and Jewish identities in a wide variety of Jewish feminist narratives. So this piece that she's done here, this is from 2016, called Exodus, I See Myself in You. What she's done here is created a notion of that this central panel, this central figure, well, she is an angel. She is an angel in Eden, in the Garden of Eden. But she's surrounded by predators and snakes. So it's not a place of safety. There's no refuge. But she's the central piece of these 3 images of refugees, people who are hounded, they are displaced, they're victims, they're pursued by demons, they are trying to get out and trying to seek safety, and yet there's danger everywhere. Her painting, though, is beautiful to look at, but deeply troubling to see. Siona Benjamin's work. Jewish tradition, fascination with the Torah. Janet Schaffner. When I first encountered Janet Schaffner as an artist, wrote a review of her work, I was totally overwhelmed by her work. It was brilliant, it was deep, it was totally Torah-based, and it was a revelation. I wrote actually 2 reviews of her work. So a little bit background on her. She grew up in the rough and tumble streets of East Harlem in the 1930s and 1940s. Then she had a career, and she had children. She was an art teacher. But in the 1980s, her artwork began to evolve and actually explore all of Tanakh, all of the Bible. This also reflected the fact that she had become an observant Jew and, quote, learning in the traditional sense of exploring the text to uncover esoteric and profound connections, so she said. Over the next 30 years, her works have unflinchingly examined many of the most difficult Torah narratives using deep learning, a keen visual sense, and more than a touch of feminist outrage. The critical edge found in her paintings reflects a rigorous approach to learning Torah that does not flinch from asking the hard questions, and perhaps more importantly, facing the equally difficult answers the paintings imply. So this is one of her very late works. It's one that Baigell shows in his work on her, in the essay on her. And this is called The Assumption of Serach bat Asher. Who is she? What's going on here? So we see a ladder. We see this older woman in the corner staring back at us. And we see up here a figure flying in the sky, perhaps being taken up heavenward, an assumption as it were, into heaven by angels. Who was Serach bat Asher? She was the daughter, obviously, of Asher. Who is Asher? Asher is one of Jacob's sons. She's one of the 10 sons of, she's one of the, he is one of the sons of Jacob, and she is his daughter. So if you'll remember the sons of Jacob, what do? They sell their brother, Joseph. They sell him down to Egypt. They hate him. And in fact, what they say is they tell their father Jacob, they say that Joseph was actually had been killed by a wild animal, and they present his bloody coat to prove it. Jacob, the father, mourns. He's devastated. Time goes on. There's a famine. And we know, of course, Joseph goes down to Egypt, and the whole story evolves with him and Potiphar's wife and all this. And then he gets into prison, and he comes out of prison. And what he interprets Pharaoh's dreams, and he's made essentially the prime minister of Egypt. And then his brothers, now in famine, come down looking for food in Egypt. And what do? They encounter this man who's their brother. And after a bit of the story, he reveals himself to them. I am Joseph, your brother. Well, the brothers, they have a bit of a problem on their hands, don't they? We told our father that he was dead. What are we going to do? We have to go tell him that our father, that Joseph is alive, but how can we do it? And we're afraid actually that it's going to kill him. So they take this young girl, Sarah, daughter of Asher, and says, go in and talk to your grandfather. Somehow tell him that your uncle Joseph is alive. And what does she do? She takes a harp and she goes into the tent that Yaakov is standing in. He's standing and he's praying. And she plays the harp and she sings sweetly to him. Joseph is alive. Joseph is alive. And those words somehow are able to penetrate his consciousness without upsetting him and without killing him. And he wakes up from his prayers and he turns to her. He says, what you have told me. Oh my God, you are so blessed. I bless you, you will live forever. And hence, Sarah lives forever, or what you would think to be forever. So this is happening at the time when Jacob and the boys are about to go down to Egypt, now under the protection of Joseph, to be sustained in Egypt. But of course, what happens then is that they all die off, and the Egyptians enslave them, and it becomes the time of the slavery of the Jewish people in Egypt until they're brought out of Egypt by Moses. Who's around still? Sarah. She knows where the bones of Joseph are, buried in the Nile in a casket. And she tells Moses, here they are, and take them back to the promised land where Joseph wanted to be buried. And so she's able to bring things together. She is the agent of memory in Jewish life, Sarah, a radical agent. She promotes action through her memory and creates healing. And so here we have Janet Schaffner as an older artist, as an older woman. She's sitting at the top of the ladder, remembering all the stories that she has illustrated, that she's made as paintings, and the complexities. And she's also the agent of memory, of Torah memory, and of an artist engaging in that memory. This is her self-portrait a year before she passes away. Toby Kahn. Toby views himself, quote, as a conceptual artist whose work is influenced by fractal geometry, color theory, and the power of sacred space. As an observant Jew, he is also a teacher, a painter, a sculptor, oh my goodness, creator of ritual objects, designer of synagogues, multi-faith hospital and hospice interiors over his 45-year career. So this is the Shalom Bat chairs by Toby Kahn. The 4 decorated chairs are for the mothers, the grandmothers, and other female family at a Shalom Bat ceremony. And in fact, I have to tell you, I've done a search today. They may be absolutely unique in contemporary Judaica. The Shalom Bat ceremony, you should know, names the newly born female infant and welcomes her into the Jewish covenant and community, especially in modern liberal Judaism's egalitarian traditions. A unique piece of Judaica, a unique piece of art by Toby Kahn, in which abstractly he managed to sum up the four matriarchs and, as it were, give them a place at this ceremony of naming a baby girl. David Wander. David Wander is an amazing artist, no doubt about it. You should understand that many of these people I know and I've worked with over the years. In my mind, he is most famous for his illuminated Megillah project. It's perhaps the ultimate expression of contemporary Jewish book art. It includes the Book of Ruth, the Book of Esther, the Song of Songs, Ecclesiastes, and the Book of Lamentations. Most, though, are accordion books, measuring about 20 inches high, maybe that's around there, 20 inches high to 30 feet long. Long narratives in which he illuminates with text these various books that are all called Megillot. So this one is actually a fixed piece, images that are taken from his Megillah on the book of on the Song of Songs. And the Song of Songs, here he illuminates this passage, which is spelled out in the Hebrew, but in English I'll read it to you. I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. Come, my beloved, let us go into the open. Let us lodge in the villages among the henna shrubs. Let us go early to the vineyards. Let us see if the vine has flowered, if its blossoms have opened, if the pomegranates are in bloom. There I will give my love to you. So his depiction of a female, a male, the grapevines, all of these things, the pomegranates, they evoke something. They take a core piece of the Song of Songs. This piece is an unusually sensual and symbolic evocation of the Song of Songs. Song of Songs, which is a love song between God and the Jewish people. Jewish tradition antinomian challenge. If some of you haven't been using the word antinomian, it simply means not normative, outside the box. Archie Rand. So I mentioned Archie before. Archie loves to do large series of paintings. You can see here from 1992, he did this one painting of 60 paintings from the Bible. Okay, and he uses contemporary techniques such as comic books and meaning comic book form, word balloons and bold letters, underlying, etc. Well, this particular one, oh, by the way, all these paintings and 60 paintings from the Bible, this is all based upon something that's not contemporary, Iconis Bibliali, from 1630 by Christian artist Matthias Merian. So he uses the Merian's images simply as a structure in which he can basically enter into the text and find that he calls it the punch of the original Hebrew. But let's look at what he actually does. So here, this is what? The binding of Isaac. Okay, here's Abraham with a knife and Isaac on the altar. Right? And, oh, wait a minute, all the way up in the sky, that's an angel. The angel has just said, Abraham, Abraham. And Abraham has responded, I'm here. But what Archie does, he doesn't just say, I'm here. He underlines it, and puts it in caps and exclamation point. So this response is, quote, textually true, and yet visually it's impatient, it's impertinent. It implies a fundamental challenge to God's concept of a test. Rand pushes that envelope in a way that I think is brilliant. It's an earlier work. So, as I said, he's one of the most prolific creators of contemporary Jewish art. And not that I have to prove it, but he did something called 613 paintings in 2008. Well, okay, so on the left you see here, this is a photograph I took in his studio back then, and each canvas is 20 inches by 16 inches, okay? It takes up 1,700 square feet of wall space. So each one of these paintings is a, quote, illustration, meaning a visual image that Archie has arrived at about one of the 613 biblical mitzvahs found in the 5 books of Moses. So one of the issues with this series he did then was that you see this Hebrew writing under each image, and what is that? That's actually the Hebrew equivalent of the number of the mitzvah. Okay, that doesn't get us very far unless you happen to know the number of every mitzvah, which almost nobody does. But it's his way of being abstract and making you dig into it and maybe opening up a book and finding it. But then something very nice happened with Archie. He then put all of these into a book, and it was published in 2015 by Penguin Random House, the Blue Rider Press imprint. And in fact, now he has the mitzvah underneath the image. So I actually know what he's talking about. And this idea of taking the astronaut floating in space, perhaps floating over the moon next to another planet with all the stars, now suddenly the notion that the mitzvah is to know there is a God, it starts to coalesce. It starts to come together. It seems like many people thought this was a pretty good idea because it was reviewed in October 2015 in the New York Times, and it was also cited as the editor's choice in the book review. Rand's 613. Okay, Yonah Burra and Katsarina Kozera. Forgive my mispronunciation. This is a book this is a work they did in 2017. It's called The Book of Jonah. Okay, so here it's actually it's a play on Jonah's name, and actually maybe I actually got the name of the word incorrect. So the two of them worked on this together, probing the passageways, say, between cultures and continents as immigrants and converts. Both of them are converts. It's a play on Vera's name and the biblical figure of Yonah. The book of Yonah, her name, transposes the biblical whale to a submarine chartering the Atlantic and arriving in New York's East River. The submergence of the submarine also serves as a metaphor for immersion in the mikveh as part of the conversion process. Yonah Vera is a Dutch-born, New York-based multidisciplinary visual artist whose work explores themes of identity, ecology, heritage, and transformation. Her practice spans paintings, installation, video, new media, and often combining traditional techniques with contemporary narratives. But now I've been dying to say this. She is, quote, also, she is the founding director of the Jewish Art Salon. She did that in 2008. It is the world's largest Jewish visual arts organization. As I said before, it is based in New York City. It's got tons of members, and it's very active. We have done many art exhibitions, over 40 art exhibitions and 30 events. It goes on, and you can find us, by the way, at jewishartsalon.org. We are very proud of the salon and very, very thankful for the leadership and endless work of Yonah to keep the salon alive all of these 17 years. We thank you, Yonah, a great deal. In fact, there's an exhibition up now in the Philadelphia Museum of Jewish Art, of course, in Philadelphia. It's called Fallout, October 7th and the New Anti-Semitism. And it's presented by the Philadelphia Museum of Jewish Art and the Jewish Art Salon. And it has, let's see here, it has something like 25 visual artists who are exhibiting there. We'll be going down to Philadelphia next week to do a panel presentation on these artists. And of course, it's exactly what you might imagine it is. It's an investigation of something that artists cannot turn away from, i.e., from the events of October 7th and the new anti-Semitism. Very, very contemporary, very good, very powerful exhibition that the Jewish Art Salon has put together for the Philadelphia Museum of Jewish Art. We expect it to be up until March of 26. But if you would like to go and see it, please contact the congregation that hosts the museum. Is the congregation Rodef Shalom, and you can look them up under both the Jewish Art Salon and also the name of the exhibition, Fallout. My dear friend Joel. Joel Silverstein is one of my oldest and best friends, and he is a fellow traveler in Jewish art, to say the least. His quote, Matthew describes his work as a mashup of ancient religious themes and biblical persons, Silverstein's own history and experience, pop culture, artists, and art historical knowledge, including figures derived from the old master paintings, motion picture stills, comic books, and photographs of members of his family, all of which might be jostled together in settings that range from ancient sites to locales where Silverstein has lived when a youth. This is one of his, not early paintings, but in 2012, in which actually he calls the House of El. Well, Joel has a thing about Superman. If you notice, this Superman also kind of looks like an Orthodox Jew. And therefore, he sees Superman, in fact, as the stand-in for the Jew, the role of the Jew to save society. So let me go on with another work of his. This one. This is typical of his work, Deuteronomy. Here we have Charlton Heston standing in as Moses, and the revelation, meaning everyone looking up, perhaps at the Ten Commandments or the top of the mountain. Everyone here is looking up. One man over here is pointing up, and what's that? That is seen as, look, up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman. This is what Joel does. He brings together popular culture, Jewish ideas, and makes them into one. Really quite brilliant. So much so, he did a book. His book is called The Brighton Beach Bible. And it was written, Joel wrote it, along with Ori Soltes, the noted author and critic. And it's an autobiographical painted narrative based on Exodus story of the Hebrew Bible. 64 full-page images, an artist's catalog raisonné, and comic book style sequential art. This is his stand, as it were. And you see here, you have people at the beach. You have Hasidim watching a wedding over here. And you have the whole little Eastern European village over here. Actually, it's a village in Jerusalem. And of course, you have there the parachute in Coney Island. You have a figure here from Michelangelo's Last Judgment. This is the kind of work that he does. It's really brilliant. It is intellectually stimulating and artistically brilliant. So Matthew said about my work, he said, but his art is not religious art. It's not art about belief. His images grow from passages that disturb him and that lead to the questioning of the incidents described in the texts, or that trigger comparisons to contemporary events. Thank you very much, Matthew. So, and he wrote a beautiful piece on me in this book, but I wanted to show you just one of the images, which seems to fit into our theme tonight. It's called Rebbe's Maid. So, who's Rebbe? Rebbe was Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. He was the redactor and the editor of the Mishnah, the oral Torah, the oral law. He's greatly respected in his time, right? We're dealing with the first century of the Common Era. And he was loved. So when he was dying, his students were devastated. They prayed for his recovery. This story, by the way, is taken directly from the Talmud. So as Rebbe's maid was taking care of him, she saw how much terrible pain he was in. So while the rabbis were incessantly continued their prayers, they're down here, praying in the room in here. Some guys are praying in the hallway here. And actually, I think some more, and some women are praying back here. The whole yeshiva here on the first floor are praying for Rebbe in the window up here to get better, to recover from his illness, well, she saw how much pain he was in. And she took up a large jar to the roof. And she threw it down from the roof to the ground. And with a loud crash, for a moment, they ceased praying. And the soul of Rebbe was allowed to depart to its eternal rest. So, you see, this painting is about the decisive action of a humble woman to end the suffering of someone she loved and cared for. So this has a personal dimension for me. So I painted this painting because the Talmudic story interested me. And I thought it was significant that a woman had taken matters into her own hand. But let me just say something personally. My daughter, Julia McBee, is a nurse practitioner in pediatric palliative care. She has a colleague, Dr. Moshe Cohen, who actually saw this painting on my website. He immediately wanted to buy it. Why? Because its depiction encapsulated one of the main aspects of his philosophical approach to palliative care. His rabbi, Reb Moshe David Tendler, a noted expert in Jewish medical ethics, frequently uses this Talmudic passage as an additional textual support to his halakhic position that if in a case of someone who is dying and suffering, but is prevented from dying by some agent or process, it is permissible to remove that agent, to pull the plug, to allow the person to die peacefully. Since now normally Jewish law forbids any action that could hasten an individual's death, this is not accepted by all halakhic authorities. Nevertheless, Rabbi Tendler's position emphasizes the elimination of suffering, meaning, of course, the quality of life, to be a crucial mitigating factor, much like Rebbe's maid. Her intervention acted to allow Rebbe to peacefully die. Wow, who knew? This is me standing in front of the Edward Hopper painting early Sunday morning in the Whitney Museum. And, it's interesting, considering my use of Hopper's early Sunday morning to illustrate a Talmudic tale, I guess this is a good example of Jewish identity in American art. So some of Matthew Baigell's final comments. He says, finally, this generation often chose to explore their own minds through the ancient texts. So their desire to learn is not an ongoing exercise in piety. It's a way to apprehend the world, a way to find or maintain and sustain community attachment as well as a healthy spiritual outlook. Nothing is determinate in these artists, but rather the ancient texts have served as a guiding force in the creation of their art and in the manner they conduct their lives. His final statement in his book was, for these artists, it's not necessary to or essential to assert aggressively their Jewishness or to write about it. Rather, just as Janet Schaffner, remember, can be associated with Serach, the artists discussed here are perpetuating the Jewish memory materially through their religiously themed art. They're doing it. They're living it. They do not worry it. They live comfortably with both their Jewish and their American identities, which makes them members of a unique generation in the history of American Jewish art. So far, so wrote Matthew Baigell. I just want to close. I am deeply indebted to Matthew Baigell for the 30 years of interviews and dozens of artists and years of research to create this groundbreaking book on contemporary Jewish culture. Matthew, you have immeasurably expanded our knowledge of what inspired Jews can do visually with our rich texts and culture. Perhaps more importantly, you have created the essential foundation for future Jewish artists to know that they have a vibrant visual and intellectual heritage to grow from. Matthew, thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much, Richard, for that really amazing presentation. And we also owe a lot to Matthew Baigell, so we will thank him as well. So for those of you who are out there, please feel free to continue putting questions into the Q&A. But I want to start with one question. How do you think that these works fit into sort of the rest of American modern art that this book covers, sort of the period that this book covers?
They they fit in two ways. They
Mhm.
either stand totally outside of it, or they actually find corners of it in which they reverberate in any number of ways. Many of the techniques and the sensibilities that these artists use are totally contemporary.
Mhm.
They range from conceptual to abstract to environmental. Toby Kahn's chairs are effectively environmental. I mean, they are they have to be placed somewhere. But the fact that, you know, we live in a time, not just recently, but for quite a while, in which things Jewish or things with serious subject matter were scorned. So there they stand outside of it. But little by little, things I think are coming in. So we'll see.
Thank you. And another question. So we saw a lot of works, which thank you for letting us see all of those, but a lot of them return to traditional subjects, like the Torah and, biblical stories. Why do you think that these continue to have such an appeal to artists in the modern era?
Because they're exciting. They are. I mean, I don't suggest you just see it, but I mean, the latest movie, we're almost 2.5 hours long, is Frankenstein.
Mhm.
Why return to Frankenstein? Because these are seminal subjects. They have content. And we need content. And so the stories that are in the Torah and the stories that are in Jewish tradition, the stories that are in the Talmud, the they really are still very much, they're not just stories, they're the fabric of our lives. And really, it is mostly because of a prejudice. They say, "Oh, if it's biblical, I don't want. I know I can't listen to that." People have to get over that because we, as artists, have gotten over it.
Mhm.
That's the important thing. That's the distinction between us and the previous generation. The previous generation, many of them were still fighting and saying, no, I have to break free from the old country. Almost all these artists did not have to break free intellectually or artistically from the old country.
Thank you. So another question we got, are there any artists that weren't mentioned in the book or in this presentation that you think our audience should check out and should also know about in this kind of similar vein?
Okay, this presentation was about Matthew's book. So I
Mhm.
stuck to the main artists. I deviated with a couple of artists that I wanted to include, maybe two, but basically this was his show. There are lots of artists who are doing similar work that I could have spoken about. On the other hand, it would have been an hour or 2 hours longer. No, the diversity of contemporary Jewish art is quite amazing. We have this group called the Jewish Art Salon. There's 25 artists in the show down in Philadelphia that are all who are doing real significant work. So no, there are plenty of artists. It would be amiss actually to name them. See this, and that one. No, go on the website of the Jewish Art Salon. You'll see lots of different names that you don't see here tonight, and it's a whole world to explore.
Great. And I'm just going to put that in the chat for people to get.
JewishArtSalon.org.
Oh, great. I will put that there. And can you also just remind us of the name of Matthew's book, just like the full title?
Jewish Identity and American Art.
There we go.
You know, I was so impressed with it when it first came out. And naturally, he interviewed me and I kind of knew what was going on. And then I've spoken about it before. Going through it this time for this presentation, I'm impressed yet again. The depth. There's so much more that I didn't even touch on. Oh, I mean, it just goes on and on. This was just a short survey of the artists, some of the artists that he deals with. It's much deeper. It's much more profound in how he tries to understand. Remember, he's a historian and a historian of American art, of how this group of Jews and Jewish art is situated within the larger picture of American art. It's brilliant, just astounding.
Yes, I recommend everybody should check it out. And we also have people asking about your work. So I'm putting your website in the chat as well.
Okay, thank you.
And everybody checks that out. So we are a little bit short on time because we had a lot of great content. So before we end, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked you at the end of the last session, which is, can you give us a little bit of a preview of the next session?
Sure, that's called the radical camera.
Mhm.
And I haven't seen this lecture, which I probably gave, I don't know, it could have been like 8 years ago, and I'm going to be revising it. But basically, it concerns the photography of Jewish photographers between the late 20s, really, the 1930s and the 1940s. You have a couple of people, some work in the 50s, in which you have an organization and then a group of mainly Jewish photographers who are radicals. They're left-wing people who demand social change. But it's different areas of the city. Some is the Lower East Side, some is the whole section on Harlem. And it was a really exciting time to be a photographer because you felt like with this new medium, photography in the 1930s, right, you could really make a change. And some of them did. Things were pretty much shut down a lot. Yeah, when I remember it now, were shut down in the 1950s by the McCarthy era. But it's a very relevant for our times in terms of the history of photography and the history of the image to stimulate social change.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to that next session. And Richard, I want to thank you again for today's amazing session.
You're very welcome.
So I also want to thank everybody who joined us today. Thank you so much. And again, I recommend that you join us for future sessions that Richard will be teaching. If you enjoyed today's program, we hope you'll consider making a donation to support the museum at mjhnyc.org/support. And also joining us for our upcoming programs, including the New York Jewish Book Festival, which is this Sunday. And you can find more information about all of our upcoming events at mjhnyc.org/current events. Richard, thank you again.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Have a great night, and we'll see you all soon.